So, why do you think couples and people fight? Tim Keller, who's the author of this book, he's going to say self-centeredness. Because every single one of us are selfish. All right, so let's go into that. Problem of self-centeredness. Self-centeredness is a havoc-wreaking problem in many marriages. And it is the ever-present enemy of every marriage. It is the cancer in the center of a marriage when it begins, and it has to be dealt with. And it's not just marriage, it's for every single relationship probably. Okay? When it comes down to it, I mean, everything you guys talked about, if you go into the root of it, it's really because of self-centeredness.
Why? Self-centeredness, by its very character, makes you blind to your own while being hypersensitive, offended, and angered by that of others. The result is always a downward spiral into self-pity, anger, and despair, as a relationship gets eaten away to nothing.
Yeah, right? If there's two self-centered people, it can never get better. Right? Because I'm going to say it's your fault. You're going to say it's my fault. And if you just keep saying, no, it's your fault, it's your fault, your fault, then it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. All right. So here's what usually happens within a marriage, but also within some relationships that you guys have been in as well. Let's see how it goes. I'll just read this. You decide to get married, or you get together, or you befriend a person because there is some kind of connection or attraction or chemistry. However, after some time, you begin to find out how selfish this wonderful person is.
Correct.
Yes? Correct?
Yes, correct.
You discover that the wonderful person has been going through a similar experience, and she or he begins to tell you how selfish you are.
They're so wrong.
Okay? So you guys see what's going on, right? You get together because you guys have that physical attractiveness or chemistry or whatnot. But what happens? You start realize how selfish they are. At the same time, they start seeing how selfish you are. So what do? You conclude that your spouse's selfishness is more problematic than your own. Okay, just like what David said. Okay, it's clearly their problems. Okay, of course, I have problems too, but in the end, it's them. And that's why, again, people who get married or people who start dating, you start thinking about, oh, maybe if I married a different girl or a different guy, if I date this guy or different, then it'll be better. Why? Because the problem is not me, problem is them.
So do you think when people say it's good to date around, it's because of, they say date around so you know which guy or girl is best for you? It's because of
this?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's just kind of like clothes. Yeah. It's like shopping. Yeah. So you think of people as just like a commodity or like things you could just wear and just toss back and just return. But the problem, I mean, I understand what they're saying, but I also feel like if they were just pieces of clothes and just people were just pieces of things, then I think it's okay. But I think because we have emotions and they have emotions, it's a lot more complicated than that. Yeah. So I actually think dating out a lot is actually very, very harmful for you and harmful for the other person as well. Yeah. All right, let's continue on. So here's the possibilities. Two possibilities. What you can do when your marriage or relationship gets this far, and we've come to one, which is that person is the problem. So this is what happens. Jeremy?
1. Your spouse is the problem. The problem is that your spouse will probably think the same thing about you. What follows is the development of emotional distance and slowly negotiated kind of ceasefire.
Right. Okay? So if you take this route, you say, okay, Jeremy's the problem. But again, Jeremy's going to think I'm the problem. Okay? So what usually happens, again, within a relationship or within like friendship, right? You could just not talk to each other and stuff like that. But within a marriage, you're living with them. So what happens is there's emotional distance. There's some bitterness that happens. Okay? But biggest thing is some kind of ceasefire. So you basically, people start saying this. They go, oh, I know what makes them mad. Okay, so I'll just not even address it. So in that sense, that's kind of like a ceasefire, right? You're not communicating, right? You stop working on the relationship. You just slowly, just, okay, you do your own thing, I'll do my own thing, kind of a thing. Okay, kind of like Korea. Korea, there's technically still war, just ceasefire, right? They're totally operating as a totally two separate country, even though they're still one country in some sense. So that's what marriages look like a lot for a lot of people. Destiny?
There are some things your spouse does that you hate, but you stop talking about them as long as he or she stops bothering you about certain other things. No one changes for the other. Outcome: unhappy marriage, divorce.
Okay, so this doesn't seem like it's a good option. All right, Jules?
I am the problem. To see your own selfishness as a fundamental problem and to treat it more seriously than you do your spouse's. You stop making excuses for selfishness. You should begin to root it out as it's revealed to you.
Okay, so again, this is the second option. And by the way, if you get nothing out of it, this is the main lesson from this Bible study today. Okay, even if you fall asleep, Nicole. Just kidding. She's talking today, so she'll be fine. Okay, so again, if you see that it's you're the problem, that you have something that you need to work on, then again, there's a possibility. Again, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden relationship's going to be okay, right? But again, now there's a possibility. Nicole?
If two spouses each say, I'm going to treat my self-centeredness as a main problem in the marriage, you have the prospect of a truly great marriage. Outcome: great and happy marriage.
Yeah. Right? Again, imagine if two people say, oh, I need to work on stuff. And then Grace says, oh, I need to work on stuff. Right? Imagine how good that marriage can be instead of saying, no, you're the problem. No, you're the problem. And just pointing finger at each other. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, again, this seems very, very simple. But again, there's a reason why we don't do this. Why? Let's dive in deeper. Wounds we carry. There are many reasons that we cannot. There's many reasons why we cannot see our own self-centeredness. One of the main factors that hide it from us is our own history of mistreatment. Many people come to marriage having been seriously hurt by parents, lovers, former spouses. Therefore, woundedness is compounded self-doubt, guilt, resentment, and disillusionment. And woundedness makes us self-absorbed. Okay? Basically what it's saying is one of the reasons why we come in so selfish is because we all have wounds. We all have been hurt. Okay? So basically it's like I gave my heart to this girl or this guy, but that person took advantage of me. Then now I'm hurt by that. So now when I go into my next relationship, what's going to happen? I'm not going to go in and say, okay, here's my heart again, right? Now I'm going to be a lot more guarded. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's why, again, we come in very selfish because all of us have wounds.
That's baggage, right?
And that's baggage.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
How do you fix that wound?
So we'll get there.
That's
okay, very good question.
You don't want to date around a lot.
Yeah. Because what people don't realize is instead of thinking it as like clothes, I think you should think of marriage or relationship that doesn't work out more as car accidents. I think that's a better way of putting it. Right. So yeah, you'll drive better or you'll drive more carefully next time because of that. But is it worth all the crashes and all the PTSD that you'll have with that? Okay.
This is not hard to see in others, of course. When you begin to talk to wounded people, it is not long before they begin talking about themselves. They're so engrossed in their own pain and problem that they don't realize what they look like to others. They are not sensitive to the needs of others.
Yeah. This is very, very important. I remember I was in, I think I tell you guys this all the time, but there was a student when we were at Andrews together. Man, she had it bad. Like her life, it was really, really bad, right? But like literally, she had this like victim, I am a victim thing. And so all she would talk about is herself. And it's like, we try to like encourage her and like try to have her like listen to other people, but no, it's like, no, but I'm a victim. It's like, it's all me, right? Again, but that makes sense, right? If somebody was walking and then they fell down and broke their arm, they're not going to be thinking about you. They're going to be thinking about themselves, right? About how much their arm hurt. They're not going to be like, oh, hey, oh, I'm sorry that you're waiting for me because I broke my arm. Like, they're not going to be considerate like that, right? Because they're in so much pain. So a lot of the most self-centered people, if you think about it, are actually one of the most wounded people. Right? I mean, again, that doesn't excuse their selfishness or self-centeredness, but again, we're able to understand they have a lot of wounds. That's why. Right? All right, next.
We, the wounded, are always the last to see our self-absorption. Our hurts and wounds can make our self-centeredness even more intractable. When you point out selfish behavior to a wounded person, they will say, well, maybe so, but you don't understand what it's like. The wounds justify the behavior.
Right. Again, that's why we talked about this in our lemon series too, right? How people, when they're going through suffering and pain, they like to stay there. Because again, they like the feeling of like, oh, you know, people are like paying attention to me. Or they could justify behaviors. Even if I'm a jerk to you, I can say, well, you don't know what I've been through. Okay? So again, not a very healthy place to be, obviously. But all of us, I think to some degree, probably understand this too. Because we've been at places where we've been hurt. And all we see is ourselves during that time. Right? All right. So, once again, how do we diagnose this? And what's the treatment for this? For our selfishness. All right, let's get there. This is a secular model. Is it Julie's turn or whose turn? Destiny?
The assumption is that people are, at the core, good. Therefore, if people are self-absorbed and messed up, it is argued it is only because they lack healthy self-esteem.
Right. And it makes sense, right? It's you've been wounded, right? Maybe your parents were oppressive to you. Maybe your girlfriend or boyfriend took everything from you. Again, the idea is because of that, you have low self-esteem, right? So you have esteem issues. So the secular model is, so if you go to therapy, if you break up, you have an emotional breakdown or something like this is what they would tell you. This is the treatment.
Be good to yourself. Live for yourself, not for others. Stop letting others run your life. And find out what your dreams are and take steps to fulfill them.
Okay. Okay. So again, right? Let it go. Let it go. Right? It's basically that, right? Don't worry about what other people think. Let it go. Okay. Just basically, I'll do whatever I want now. That's basically the whole song. Okay. It's basically this idea. Okay. You do whatever you want. You serve yourself, these kind of things. Okay, sounds good. What's the problem?
It's going back to being selfish.
Okay, good. You're not fixing selfishness. If anything, this aggravates your selfishness. Does that make sense? It encourages your selfishness. Why? Now you go into your next relationship and says, you now have to do everything that I want. If you don't fit into my life, then this relationship is over. How dare you try to change me? So if anything, you just become more self-absorbed and more selfish, if anything. Does that make sense? So again, it sounds really good. It sounds like, oh yeah, you've been hurt. So if you treat the person well, okay, if you treat yourself better, then, oh, it should be better, but it doesn't work like that. Right? If anything, we get more selfish. So let's see what the Christian way is. Nicole?
Tell me. Step 2, Christian. This is the essence of sin. According to the Bible, living for ourselves rather than for God and the people around us.
Yeah. And this is like, yeah, this is the main message of Christianity, right? Is that every single human being, we're all essentially sinners. That's why we do selfish things. Okay, so do you see the difference between the secular model and the Christian model? Secular model says, well, all of us are good people. We're born good, except we get hurt by people, and that's when we start doing selfish things. And so therefore, to get to the good thing, become good again, heal yourself by doing stuff for yourself. But again, that doesn't work. Whereas the Christian model says, within each and every one of us, we all have a disease, which is more dangerous than corona, which is, right, or self-centeredness. All we care about is ourselves. Okay, so what's the solution? Acceptance of the gospel. This is what in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and Jesus died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. Do you see that? That whole phrase right there is this idea that we're living for ourselves. All we care about is me, 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 me. Okay? But Jesus came to die for us so that we don't have to do that anymore. Okay, so what does that exactly look like? That's where we're going next. Real picture of marriage.
The picture of marriage is of two needy people, unsure of their own value and purpose, finding their significance and meaning in one another's arms. If you add two vacuums to each other, you only get a bigger and stronger vacuum, a giant sucking sound. This is exactly the problem if you put two needy, self-centered people together. It only gets worse. If we look to our spouses to fill up our tanks in a way that only God can do, we are demanding an impossibility.
Right. And again, this is why there's problems within friendships or relationships or even within marriage. Okay? Because again, it makes sense. Why? Because all of us are selfish. We all have this disease. And we're all sucking. We're always like sucking, sucking, sucking. Okay? No pun intended. Okay? We suck. Okay? But again, the Christian idea is that, again, if you put two sucky people together, it's only going to become a suckier situation. Right? Instead of saying, oh, it's two perfect people living together, but then they're not treating each other right, and that's why it's a problem. That's how secular way would look at it. Jeremy?
The gospel, brought home to your heart by the Spirit, can make you happy enough to be humble, giving you an internal fullness that frees you to be generous with the other, even when you're not getting the satisfaction you want out of the relationship.
Okay, because we talked about this. We talked about how if I say you're the problem, and if you say I'm the problem, and if I say, Jeremy, give me, give me, give me, and Jeremy says, no, you give me, give me, give me, we talked about how that's a vicious cycle. That's not going to get anywhere. But the gospel actually breaks that vicious cycle. Okay, how? Okay, that's what we're getting into, okay? Because if we're trying to say, you give me, you satisfy me, you fulfill me, that's not going to work within this relationship. Okay, so we have to cut this vicious cycle out. How do we do it? Okay, let's get there. Destiny? Oh.
Without the help of the Spirit, without a continual refilling of your soul's tank of the glory and love of the Lord, such submission to the interest of the other is virtually impossible to accomplish for any length of time without becoming resentful.
Okay, so it's this idea of, instead of saying, you give me, you give me, you give me, you think about, oh, God has given me. God has given me all of these things. That's what you think about.
It's like your God should pull on your heart.
Yeah,
You can't
exactly.
anything else.
Yeah, that's the idea. There's a term for this that Tim Keller uses, and we talked about this quite a bit.
I call this love economics. You can only afford to be generous if you actually have some money in the bank to give. If you know the work of the Spirit in your life, you have enough love in the bank to be generous to your spouse even when you are not getting much affection or kindness at the moment.
Right. So you guys heard of love bank before, right? It's this idea is you can only give love when you are filled with, when you have something in there. So the idea is, obviously, if both of you are sucking, it's not going to get anywhere. Okay? But again, if you are filled up, or if you have some money, not even a lot, but if you have some, then you're able to give a little. Does that make sense? So the idea is, if you are receiving love from God, then you could break that cycle. Instead of saying, Jeremy, you give me, you give me, you give me, now I can say, no, I've received from God. Now I can give love to you. Then what happens? The cycle, it breaks down. Right? It's not about me, but now I can serve you. And then from that, hopefully that could inspire Jeremy to serve me as well.
Question.
Yes.
Can it be one way?
Yeah. That's what we talked about last week. Again, I think it's not very ideal, but I think there is a possibility that it could work if this is coming from God. Because I think if you're just trying to like muster it up by yourself, because I know like, other people do that. Like, you know what, today I know my husband's going to be like yelling at me or demanding so much, but today I'm just going to be really patient. Or you know what, I'm going to try to be positive thinking and these kind of things. I think that only goes so far. You run out quick, right? So you need a source that's continuing to fill you up. And that, you can only get that from God. Because when you start giving without receiving anything or without being filled, that's when resentment happens. And that's when bitterness happens. Yeah. So I think I'm not saying it's going to be perfect just because like you give, that person's going to like change. I'm not saying that by any means, because there might be a chance that person might not. Right? And that person might be so like wounded or so selfish that a person might see that or take advantage of you because of that. But I think at least it gives you an opportunity for it to work at least. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay.
To have a great marriage requires a spirit-created ability to serve, to take yourself out of the center, to put the needs of others ahead of your own. The Spirit's work of making the gospel real to the heart weakens the self-centeredness in the soul. It is impossible for us to make major headway against self-centeredness and move into a stance of service without some kind of supernatural help.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, the idea is it takes God's love for you to realize, right? Again, the whole gospel thing, that's the whole gospel message thing too, right? Is that you've been living as a sinner and you didn't realize that until Jesus came into your life, right? So again, it breaks this whole cycle of like, you need to change, and instead you go, oh, I need to change too. I thought he was the problem, I thought she was the problem, but now instead I go, oh, I'm actually part of the problem as well. I need love a lot. All right, continuing on. Is it Julie? Or Nicole already read? So my turn. The deep happiness that marriage can bring then lies on the far side of sacrificial service and the power of the Spirit. That is, you only discover your own happiness after each of you has put the happiness of your spouse ahead of your own, in a sustained way in response to what Jesus has done for you. Again, the whole idea is the same thing. When you understand what Jesus has done for you, then with that, you can love other people too. Again, because you might be thinking, okay, but that person is taking advantage of me. Okay? And then you look at Jesus and you go, oh, I've been doing the same thing. Okay? Even if I'm loving that person doesn't change. I look at Jesus is doing the same thing. Okay? But they won't appreciate it. Again, I look at Jesus, he's doing the same thing. Right? So again, we have to, that's why it has to be response of what Jesus has done for you. When you understand what Jesus has done for you, then you have the power to love the unlovable. Okay, so we're not, by far, this is not asking you to love people that are unlovable or just out of your like own strength or anything like that. Does that make sense? So again, the idea is when you are full, when you are receiving from God, you are able to love others better as well. All right, that's it for today.